Yeah, I think you need patient capital first because you cannot change things from one day to the other. And the second thing you need is to really leverage the players because we've seen that with the women's NBA. You have one star and that brings all the traction to the sport and elevate. So the way you structure your media deals and your broadcast deals has to be completely different, more close to what you were mentioning before, the US model where athletes are able to use a lot of the content and not so much the European model. Because if you think about it, Cristiano Ronaldo, even though he made hundreds of goals, or Messi or any football players, they cannot use their content. They cannot use those goals because of the media rights deals. So on the women's game, if we want to really reach that audience and we really want to grow, we need to leverage the athletes and use them as a distribution platform to reach the audience, because that's where the growth is going to come from, and that's what will accelerate the growth.
Yeah, and I think as well, so I know, and again, sorry to reference the same example, but I know from a WSL point of view, as of this season, they've relaxed the rights from a player's point of view, and the players have access to content, clips that they can distribute. It's a win-win situation for everyone involved. It's a win-win for the league, it's a win-win for the club, but equally for the players themselves to be able to elevate the brands. And I think something that's been really nice to see is, I do think in the women's game, particularly here in England, you've got some really great figures that we can follow and see the stories, and they've got a really strong presence as well on social, and I think we need more of that as well to be able to, inspire young fans and follow someone's journey, which a lot of these stories that they're really inspiring. I think as well the difference with the women's game is that the access to talent and those players is way different than what it is with the men's. And again, I'm stating the obvious here, but I think generally when you see, the way that these female players, whether you're a football player, whether you play basketball, volleyball, whatever that is, they're a lot more relaxed or free when it comes to those opportunities and having a voice across the platforms, whereas for the men's side of things is very, very different. So I think capitalizing on that is really important.
Yeah, and I think that comes from the fact that if you think about all the professional women's athletes that you have today, they grew up without imagining a world where they will make their living out of sport, because professional sports for women didn't exist. So now they're driven by that passion. So that passion is what made them get where they are.
Yeah.
And they've been pushing the whole movement. Whether a boy that started playing football and he was good at football 20 years ago, he knew that he could make his living out of his passion. And I think that main difference, it's what makes the access and
for sure.
and the effort that the women's put into the game completely different.
Yeah, and I think there's also, and I'll reference them. I was at a talk last week, and Alessia Russo was part of the panel. Obviously, a huge figure in women's football, amazing player. And there was a really good question from the audience. I said, do you feel there's a sense of there's too much pressure and based on, you're a female player, you should have this voice and this is how you should show up? And Alessia's answer was amazing, and she referenced the fact of, for her, she does it, she feels there is a sense of responsibility, but she does it from a passion point of view, right? Being able to inspire these young girls, and equally when she was younger herself, there were certain athletes that she looked up to, and there's a responsibility from her point of view to be able to give that back to young girls, even and boys as well, watching the women's game, which I think it's amazing, and obviously it's a cycle, isn't it?
Yeah, and also it's opening up the opportunity to enjoy the game. I think sports has this unique power of getting people together at one point, at one certain moment in time, in one place. And there's nothing better than the energy that you feel on a stadium and being able to have that shared experience with thousands of people in the same place. And that energy that you feel on the stadium, it's not comparable. You can enjoy a game on TV, obviously, or in the metaverse or in whatever other use of technology. But nothing is going to never substitute the feeling of being at the stadium. Sure. And by having a new league that have more events, it's also giving access to more people to enjoy that experience. Because if you think about the Premier League, unless you are a season holder ticket of Chelsea or Tottenham, it's very hard in London to consume Premier League content live.
Yeah, for sure. And I think as well, it's as you say, it's about opening those opportunities. And I know we've been very much focused around football specifically, but even again, talking of other sports like cricket. I'll talk about cricket. I'm also involved, which I didn't mention at the beginning, but involved with Warwickshire Cricket County. I'm on the board and looking at what we're trying to do with our women's team. And, even last year, our women's team became professional. And again, I think that's probably another sport that is probably a little bit further behind than what women's football is. But that's where we want to get to. And it's not just cricket. It could also be basketball and whatever that is. And it's just around elevating the entire ecosystem, not just football itself, but other sports as well, to being able to open the doors for those new fans and being able to tell the stories across that world. I think it'll be really exciting to see where things are at in 2-3 years' time. I was reading a report, I think McKinsey mentioned that, the value of women's sport as a whole reaching around the $2.5 billion mark, which is, the gigantic numbers. And I think that's just today what those figures will look like, and the revenue and the commercial opportunity will be in 2-3 years' time, but will be really amazing and significant. And I think the other thing that I mentioned as well is that we're seeing, which is quite topical, is at the moment, just off the back of the Red Roses winning the Women's World Cup and doing such an amazing job, and us, from a sports point of view, leaning on those key tentpole moments to help supercharge the growth. We saw it with women's football back in the Euros a few years ago, and more recently, now hopefully with rugby, the Red Roses doing an amazing job and winning the Women's World Cup. There's a Women's Cricket World Cup taking place next year. So I think that's also, for me as a fan anyways, it's really exciting to see I guess the aftermath and the effects of these major tentpole moments and what they can do to help supercharge the women's game.
One of the biggest challenges I think the women's game have today is that when I look at football, when I look at rugby, when we are at a national team level, you are able to get a lot of traction. So around the Euros, around the World Cup, around all these tentpole moments. But then it's hard to transfer that to the day-to-day of the clubs. So is what you were saying, how we breach that problem, no?
Yeah, and I think, again, it's not easy, is it? I think there's responsibilities on the leagues, but equally the clubs to capitalize on those moments. And it's not to have these moments as a standalone and say, okay, well, what happens next is now the opportunity for, let's say we're talking about rugby, you've got Women's Premiership Rugby. So there's a big opportunity for the league, but equally for the clubs themselves to say, okay, we had, our athletes had an amazing tournament. How can we elevate, what can we do to help elevate, again, their profile, and not just help elevate the profile, it's more leveraging the voice of the athlete, but equally from a commercial standpoint, again, it's been able to identify those partners that they want to be part of the journey, and that you've been able to unlock new audiences, which then again, can therefore you're able to monetize those new audiences. So again, I think there's an onus and responsibility on the leagues to be able to do that. But equally, again, I talked, from an athlete point of view, that's one thing, but also it's been able to, us as fans, we have a responsibility as well, is to make sure that we're showing up to those games, make sure that, because it's all great and well, okay, we can watch the content online, which is amazing, and we get to follow our favorite players and the stories. But hey, as fans, I do think there's a level of responsibility. Let's get out there. Let's go to the stadiums. Let's support our teams. Let's watch, let's watch the coverage on live TV as well. I think there's a responsibility for us to get out there and, back the teams in that way as well.